dozen roses, such would astound you. The joy of children laughing around you. These are the makings of you. It is true, the makings of you. The righteous way to go, little one would know.
All right, peace and blessings. Welcome to another episode of Do Knowledge Radio, place where knowledge is born. It's your host, Knowledge Born Allah. We're here with the masterminds. We're here with the artists, with the thinkers, with the historians, and with the cultural curators and activators. I got my brother here, special guest co-host for today. No stranger, one of the greatest new Africans I ever met in life. You understand what I'm saying? Our brother Baba Amin of the Uhuru Academy. And we have a special guest by a special request. One of the brothers who is living proof that we can regain our narrative at any time and has dedicated his life over this last decade or two to do the work necessary from an academic and from an artistic perspective to liberate the minds and regain access to our stories. So this is a space and opportunity for us to reimagine the Black South prior to the Civil War. So it becomes my honor and privilege at this time to introduce some, present to others. A dynamic storyteller with art and with words, our brother Charles Eady here in the building. How you doing, my brother?
What's up?
So glad to hear you. I got a chance to see your exhibit in person, in part, out in Orlando when I got back to town, and I was captivated, very captivated. So I want to hear in your own words, how you got started in this particular way, telling stories as a mixed media artist and author.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and share some of this information. I would like to present a narrative that's quite different than what's commonly known. I began to think about some things when I first started my research, and I wanted to know a lot more than what I was finding in the textbooks and other books, and I kind of felt like maybe it's a little bit different than this. So let me find out on my own. And then if I find anything interesting, I'll know for myself. If I find anything interesting, I could share it with others, which was one of my key goals after I did begin to find out the information that was there, because it was quite different than what I had heard over the years, heard over the decades. It was a different type of knowledge that I was beginning to find. Yes.
Interesting. Tell us where are you originally from, Brother Eady?
I'm originally from South Carolina, and growing up there, it was an interesting hometown. A lot of support because I started drawing early, and there were a lot of my friends, family who just supported even then what I did with art. Not what I'm doing now. It didn't have a topic. It was just different things that I, like drawing, and they like.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Where about in South Carolina?
It was Fairfax, South Carolina, and I went to college about 45 miles away at Claflin University.
Okay.
It didn't start out there. I started out at another college, but that wasn't working out. So someone said, an older man who was in the class. I was going to a 2-year college, and there was an older man in the class. He saw me drawing all the time, and he said, "Why don't you go over to Claflin and apply for a scholarship there?" So I did, and I got it accepted for the scholarship.
I'll say that's what's up. Claflin. Shout out to Orangeburg or Oldburg, our people there in the Orangeburg, South Carolina. got a Clapton alum in the house, artist. We're here to talk about a very interesting work that you've done, though, powerful work that you've done called Hidden Freedom. And when our listeners, once they look it up, you're saying you're challenging the narrative, the conventional narratives about the antebellum South, right? In what way? Number one, what inspired you? Tell us a little bit about Hidden Freedom and what inspired you to create this project.
It presented a different side of the South before the Civil War, because a lot of the information that I was seeing and what I knew about all had to do with after the Civil War. And so when I decided that I was going to base all of my research before that time period, the most astonishing thing that I found out was that there were more free blacks in the South than there was in the North. And I had known, yes. And I had known about free blacks, but I always knew them to be in the North. So when I found out this kind of information that was documented from census records, there was Ira Berlin, who had researchers that searched documents about the census, and they recorded that from 1790, which was the year of the very first census, to 1860, which was the last before the Civil War, that during all of those decades, more free blacks were living in the South. And then you would wonder why, with the conditioning that we have been taught to believe about how the South was, and if they were free, why did more live there? And this is also shocking. Most of them lived there because the opportunities were greater in the South. Now, when I talk about shocking the narrative, this is some of the information that I'm talking about, shocking, the narrative, that thought, those mindsets that we have. So now those are two things that are there. So then I imagine that, okay, if they are in the South, that they're going to be very cautious about what they do, because they know the time era they live in, they know the conditions that they're in. However, it was opposite of that, and that's when I knew that these were going to be people that I would do an exhibit about, that I would do paintings about, that I would continue my research with, because they were bold. And even beyond, and even with that boldness, they took it even further. They would take matters to court. Then I'm like, wait a minute, there are more free blacks living in the South. They are taking matters to court. This is all just astonishing to me, and it drove me for the years that I did. And then with them taking petitions to court, in the beginning, I thought they had someone to, write it out for them, subscribe, what they wanted to say, and then it was presented to the court. I found out differently again. They, the free blacks, after this myth being there in my mind about how it was for blacks if they decided to read in the South. So now here they are writing petitions to the court in the South, writing petitions to the court. One of the petitions in particular was about taxes, that they were being overtaxed. Like, why are we being taxed this and the other citizens aren't taxed? And this was in 1792. And there are several petitions where they wrote and took to the court. And then you have to ask yourself, said, okay, if they got to the courthouse, did they take it there? Was it mailed there? And I found out that they had mobility within the city. They weren't just constrained. Normally, when we're thinking about the South, we're thinking about the plantations,
Mhm.
and that's the first concept that we get when we think about it. And what I'm presenting is not to change the narrative of what's happened. I know the atrocities of slavery, but what I'm presenting is a population that we were just not aware of in details.
Right.
When we a broad sense of it. But I began to question some of the, after seeing so many documents that were first-hand accounts. This wasn't a historian telling me. This was me went to the South Carolina archives, looking at documents in their own handwriting, where
Right.
they're saying what they felt also that with this tax, it was causing hardship on the females. So now it's going into their mindset. And they also would fund rebellions that would happen. A lot of time when we think about the free blacks,
Really?
we mindset with that. I found that to be a case also, would have different mindsets because it's a free black. However, they would do the petitions, and then they would sound a certain way to the government, to the system, as if they supported, what they were doing all together. We support. Now that's just some. That's just true. This is one document in particular, because most of them just maintained their own livelihoods in what they did, but they made it sound in such a way. But at the same time, they were funding rebellions. They were funding rebellions. So then there's a shifting also. It's like, okay, yes, we want the white citizens to believe that this is, how we see this, but in actuality,
Right. They put that mask on. That mask that a lot of us still wear in 2025.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, they put that mask on, that public face on. Interesting.
Now, in your research, you gave a more personal account. As to your family, you found out that some of your lineage are on some of the census documents. Can you talk about that and how that propelled you and another personal way to begin, on this question, this journey?
That was at that point, my mind was conditioned to believe everything that was taught before. I knew nothing about what I would find out later. So when I saw on the very first census, because I wanted to do some research for my father, I figured, hey, we have the internet now, online, we can go and find out a lot more than people could have 30 years ago at that point. So when I saw the first census, 1790, South Carolina, Berkeley County, Charleston, that there were other free persons that were counted on the census. That's shocking. That was shocking to me. I said, okay, so not only did free blacks exist, they are being counted on a federal census. And so with that,
as if they were citizens.
As if this, it gets real interesting. I don't know all the details about that with the citizens, because something could be on paper that you're not a citizen, but then when I look at the opportunities and the things that they did, I'm saying, well, they're doing things as if they are citizens. For example, the businesses that they own businesses, they own property. In fact, and this is documented. This is well documented. Another one of those shocking things, which I find myself a lot of times when I'm talking about this, shocking is one of the words that would probably be heard the most, because it is. On a petition, and this is by the citizens, there was a petition that wanted the free blacks to leave South Carolina, to leave the state, which brings a question also to historians. Now, there are a lot of great historians out there, but then this would bring a question to the historians who say that yes, okay, there were free blacks, but the number was never more than 2%. So if it was less than 2%, then why is there such a concern about them leaving the state? Other historians, these are the ones that I'm saying, okay, these are great. They have the number in Charleston at nearly 8%. So 8% of the population in Charleston around 1860 were free blacks. With that number, that scenery of Charleston looks very populated with the blacks of that time. So you have your free blacks there. So yes, there were slaves on the plantation, but there were also town slaves, which was a new term for me. So now you have the town slaves. Yes, so those are the ones who lived in the town, and they would take whatever they earned back to their owners. Okay. But while they were living in the town, they had mobility also. They walked around the town. So now you have the free blacks who are walking around, you have the slaves who are there, and the citizens are saying, well, we don't know who's free anymore because the number kept increasing. And so this is when they tried to limit the number of free blacks who were there by them having to do a legislative order in order for them to be free. Now, one notion that I bear against is about the white benevolent slave owner who wants to free the black slave, because that's not the narrative. That's not how most blacks became free. A lot of them bought themselves out of slavery and the opportunity. Yes.
Right. So they had to buy it, and that's so important, because especially when you deal with Hollywood and they deal with movies about slavery, that sort of thing. There's always the white savior role that's played, and again, even with the Civil War, we're talking Abraham Lincoln freed us, and we did get the movie Glory, but that was just one black platoon. So my whole life I just thought Denzel and Morgan Freeman was the only black soldiers in the Civil War, with over 180,000. And I love this because we're getting into the intricacies of life. It's so easy to turn history into caricatures and slave free, right? But life is so much more complicated than that. Racist, not racist. Life is so much more complicated than that. And your work helps break that down and put us right in there. In your research of all the things that you've uncovered, is there one particular story or individual that stands out to you the most?
Yes, in fact, there is, because once I began to research for so long, and I was just going by what I found and taking that as it is. But this was a critical moment when I began to critically think about it. Said, if this was happening, then this must have been happening. And it was with money. I said, wait a minute, if they own property, if they own businesses, they were handling money. And so when I found later these documents that showed that they did, that they found, that they handle money. And it also led me, well, I haven't been able to find this particular document, but this is a document I would like to find, or some kind of source about this topic. I do believe that they might have had accounts in the bank. They may have gone to banks. And so I haven't found the document yet, but I see a lot of things around it. They wrote wills. What their other transactions that they had. So the post office. They went to the post office. I've seen documents on that. They went to meetings. Now, some meetings that were some city meetings, they went to those meetings. Now, all I have on that is the documents. I don't have anything to show you know, what's beyond that. And so with that, I know that them and how they handled money, that there was probably bank accounts that they had.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to speak to a point real quick, Baba. You said 186,000 soldiers in the Civil War. That's the equivalent of 186 divisions.
Mhm.
So a division size element in the army or in the military period is between 10 and 15,000, right? So some places might be 20,000. That's a division, right? So if you put that number together, you're looking at a mass mobilization force that accounted for. So
Mhm.
now to add into this interest, they've been throwing this number around 13% of the population, right? Maybe they've been fudging those numbers as well because you don't get a mass mobilization of men, right? That can be mobilized in an organized fashion to fight. So that's on one side. If you look at between that time frame with Boston and everything else, right? You have another where you have free men who mobilized another 100,000 based off of where they were living. So it's like, oh, our businesses, our families, our communities, we're going to. This is the only reason why we're in the uniform
Right.
on either side of it. That's an understanding that should be noted. So the narrative, we have sprinkles of the narrative, but we're not looking at the narrative in that manner. So we're mobilized and organized before America becomes America in 1775.
Right.
There's evidence, right? So from the perspective of when we're talking about benevolent whites, we have the abolition movement. We have the abolition movement. So by the time they get hip, it's in the 1800s. But we have the abolition, quote unquote, movement from the 1600s going on up. So there's
Right.
the space, and you included something else, Charles, about the Native Americans, and you talked about a term called red bone, right? And then
Right.
uh, the bronze, what do you call it? The bronze ankles.
Brass ankles.
Yeah, yeah.
Brass.
So brass ankles. Yeah. So I want to kind of to add that in so we can look at some of these things because we've heard narratives over the years, but when we presenting these things from an evidential based perspective, we have another way to shape and mold the narratives. We have raw facts, we have raw data, we have 250 slave revolts we can go and look through on plantations. It's not a first thing. So what you add in this layer saying, okay, we had free blacks financing. You understand what I'm saying? Rebellion. It's a
Right.
whole nother shift in thought in regards to how we saw ourselves and how we saw each other and how we utilize those movements. Because we can find the relationships all the way back to the mother continent and all through the diaspora, from the 1600s on up, and then vice versa later on with the freeing of many of the West African continents and those leaders with our relationships with them as well. So
Right.
we have a long-standing symbiotic relationship, but you gave a very nuanced space in a place where we thought this was the last place. We see the mass migration
Mhm.
in a place. So they're actually forfeiting things. Literally, those narratives become true. Forfeiting lands and businesses that were theirs that they had and they owned outright, and they became stolen. So now you're looking at folks in the place of gentrification and all these other things, but the information is also lost. So definitely wanted to tap
Right.
in on that.
Great
Right.
stuff.
And you mentioned how they lost land. And as I mentioned, with the free blacks and the land that they owned, a lot of them lost a lot of land right before the Civil War, because that's when they started to move up north. And so they had lost the land. But before then, here you have them in Charleston in particular, where they owned $750,000 of property. And so this is documented in the tax records in Charleston. There was a researcher, and she was working on her doctorate degree, and that's when she pulled those numbers, because it was higher than what I had been believing for years, because I was going by a petition that I saw where it said that we want the free blacks to stay because they own this amount of property and they help us out with a lot of the work that needs to be done in the city. Right. And so they were the carpenters, they were bakers and bricklayers. So they did a lot. While
85% of skilled labor, right? There it goes.
Okay. Yeah.
85% of the skilled labor.
Yes.
So is there did you uncover any data regarding free blacks who participated in the slave economy, whether as owners or traders or anything like that?
Yes, and see that is one of the topics. That is one of those things that, because I found out something in particular that pushed me back. My research was going fine. I was finding out so much about the free blacks, and then I found out some information about my family, and so then that set me back for. I kept researching, but I had to really dig. But I kept researching, but it set me back for about 3 years. But that's when I had that mindset of how I just thought these situations were. But once I discovered that they went beyond what was commonly taught or that you would commonly hear, because even with the free blacks who owned slaves, when you go into like them starting out and their reasoning behind some of it, then you find the different things, because some of them did it, for their family members, because they wanted their family members to be out of slavery, and they had passed a legislative law, and then that's the only way that it could be done. Some saw their conditions, and others would even forge papers, emancipation papers for them. So it would fit under the title of them, owning slaves. But then when you look into it further, look into the details of it, you would find out more. And then, of course, I know of two in particular who actually owned them for profit. Pendaverus was one. He had a large plantation there. However, as I mentioned about the rebellion, he was one that would he funded against the rebellions, but he had this large number of slaves. That would go very deep. And then sometimes you will know a thing, but then it's a matter of finding out more information about it. But that's as far as I could get with him on that topic.
Wow.
But yeah,
we have so many parallels even today, just with that attitude with those who are working for the system, in the system, be it a black police officer or black capitalist or whatever, and saying, well, you know what, I'm in this position, but I'm trying to balance it. I want to keep my profit. I like how I'm living, but I want to use my influence to pull some people up at the same time. And it seems like we still kind of struggle with that balance. And so that's just very interesting in the stuff that stories are made of, going into that mindset, going to sleep at night knowing, okay, I have enslaved blacks, but that's my cousin them. I'm actually freeing them by enslaving them.
Right.
That's a heck of a psychology to deal with. That we got to put this front on for society, but over here we've carved out this space where we can be free. Yes.
And even when it came to marriage, there were black women who married slaves, which was quite interesting to me, because I didn't know about them getting married. And the reason that they, because they said slaves couldn't get married, that's just what I thought. However, with the black women who married the slaves, then being able to picture how that concept would happen, I can't fill in the details on that, but I do know that it did happen. That was an occurrence.
So you saying like free black women marrying enslaved black men?
Yes. That was a thing that happened. It happened. It happened because there were more free black women than there were free black men, and so they married slaves.
One will argue and say still is.
Right.
Some would say we're still in that situation in a lot of places. Wow. If I may acknowledge, you're a mixed media artist.
Right.
Let's get into some of the art. Let's get into some of the artistic aspects.
You read my mind. I was going in there.
of Hidden Freedom, right? And so you blend art with the history. How do your paintings and the writing, how do they complement each other? How does your research and your art complement one another in telling these stories of free black people in Hidden Freedom?
Yes, in fact, like when I was finding the information and doing the paintings, I knew from the information that a lot of it would be hard to believe unless someone is actually seeing a document. So I wanted them to not only see the painting, but to have evidence that this is where he pulled this information from. He's not just making things up. It's based on this document. Because with the first painting you had up on the screen with the man, and well, I'll go here. What I'm seeing now. This one is titled "Slightly Mixed," which I got from a book. The title "Slightly Mixed" is from writings by Virginia DeMar, where she studied different groups of free black settlements, and she coined the term triracial groups. And Eady Town is one of those triracial cities. There were blacks, Indians, and whites who lived in that settlement. And with that settlement on the first census, you will see like who lived next to each other, because it's not like the census now. The census then, they went door to door, and whatever they wrote was just right next to each other. So you were able to see some of those who were related, and then base that on documents that were also found about the Locklears and how they were related to the Eadys. And with the Kentucky Derby, like during colonial times, the blacks, and this included slaves also, they took care of the horses. So the horses ran faster. The horses ran faster for them. And so now the owner of the horses is seeing that, hey, this horse is running faster, it's winning more race. So it became more dominant for blacks to be the horse rider during those races. And horse racing is one of the longest running sport in America. And so for the first Kentucky Derby in 1875, Oliver Lewis, who was in the center of the painting, Oliver Lewis, and there were 15 jockeys, and of those 15, 13 were black. So Oliver Lewis won the very first Kentucky Derby. And then we have the other who are there, they won other years also. And there was a lady, she knows a lot about the horses and races, and she looked at the painting, and she was able to name all of them. While I'm painting them and doing the research, I'll remember their names then, but a little bit later, not too clear on the names. But Oliver Lewis, I did remember 1875.
Beautiful, powerful piece. There's so much history embodied there, right? And to have that story attached to that piece, it brings so much more, for me, value to it. You know what I'm saying? And very powerful, very powerful. So afros and banjos?
Afros and banjos. Man, the title, I could have just gone with the title on that one because that's what I got first. And then once I had the title, I said, okay, how do I attach this to a painting? And then I thought about the banjo and how it has this negative connotation about it. And so what I like to do is erase some of those concepts that's there. So I was like, how can I erase that negative concept that comes with the banjo, what they have placed on it? I said, what can I place on it as an artist? So I wanted to have an elegant lady holding a banjo to erase stigma that's behind it. And she was actually a character that's in my book. She was the voice of reason and a lot of the situations that they had to confront during those times.
Wow, that's powerful. Also, just looking at it, you know, from my point of view, we associate afros with being pro-black, but the narrative on the banjo was that that's some step and fetch it type stuff. And what this does, it says no, the afro and the banjo, that's both ours. That's right. Pro-black. You know what I'm saying? So I love that. I love how you put that together.
Right, I appreciate
you
that.
Said when you did your ancestry, Brother Charles, you were talking about the Bantu people who have more than 50% of your ancestry as the Bantu people. So I want to take a moment to ask both of y'all scholastic minds this question that they have over here, because there's a lot of tug of war in regards to identity and identity crisis. So this is very apropos in regards to self-actualization. So African ancestry versus non-African ancestry and delineation and all these things that are discussions that folks think that are new, that were rooted in the 16 and the 1700s. Should we stay here? Should we go? Should we leave the South? Should we go up north? All of these things. These are all discussions that have been had. So Anthony has a question up here. I have a question. I've been in conversation where Black Americans refuse to say they have African roots or if the slave trade ever happened. My question is, are all of us of African descent?
Excellent question, Anthony. Yeah, it's a trip that we're asking that question to me in 2025, but there's so much information out there. I'm going to pose it to our guest, Mr. Eady. In your research, did you debunk that the slave trade did not exist? Or did you find historical evidence that it did?
Yes, that's an excellent question. It would cause one to use some intellectual thinking as how that might have looked, if it did not happen, because it was an occurrence that's documented. And a lot of what I like to go on is what's been documented. Now, when you get into the different terms of what they may have been called, that's a matter of definition. But then when you look at slavery in itself and the ships that were built and the tons of evidence that support that slavery existed and that it was, and the conditioning that it has caused, in fact, it's really left a legacy on the mindsets of many, because the conditioning. Now, one thing about the slaves, because we can get a negative concept on the slave, and we even use the term slave mentality, and we'll say that's so negative. But then when you look into and you start to think, well, what did the slaves think? The slaves, they wanted to be free. They went to drastic means to be free. So there's nothing wrong with that concept to me for mental, and I know how they want to use it. But then when you just start delving into, what that mindset is, and so, in fact, it was a very, like, you are not going to keep me in this condition type of mentality. They were going to find their way out, because there were a lot of rebellions that are just not documented. They're talked about a little. and knowledge mentioned the number of rebellions that happened. Now, this one of the biggest rebellions in Charleston was with Denmark Vesey, and so that one got a lot of press attention during that time. You know, it was in the paper. They talked about it, and so that was talked about a lot because in the end, we know what happened to them. You know, it wasn't a good thing that happened to them. However, during the same time, there was another rebellion that was happening, and this was by Forrest Jack, and he would go to the different plantations and terrorize the whites who were there, and to the point where some of the slaves who were on those plantations, they joined him, and this went on for years. They could not find him. They could not catch him. And so that wasn't talked about at all. So it's a matter of what they want to talk about with those things that occurred. And a lot of them too, they didn't have the big rebellions, but they did their small rebellions where they would just leave the plantation for days. They would leave for days. But in the end, yes, slavery, slaves, the ships, it all existed.
Tell me this quick question, because your work is centered around blacks who were free during slavery. Did you find any evidence as to how they got here? Were these formerly enslaved blacks, or these people who were indigenous to this land? Did you find any evidence towards that, it related to that, as far as where these black people who were free, were they already here? Had they gotten free? A mixture? I know you said many had bought their freedom. Did you see any evidence of indigenous roots among these black people?
Now, colonial time is interesting. Now, the indigenous people is a topic that we know in America that they existed, that there were indigenous blacks who were here. You know, that narrative also, there are attempts to kind of change that around, or even not just talk about it. We just, it's common to let's just pick this up from slavery. And to add, a lot of them became free during colonial time after the Revolutionary War because of their services during the Revolutionary War. And so there was a big influx of blacks being freed after the war. And then there were other reasons. There were some that would become free as indentured servants. Some blacks actually were in America because they were indentured servants, especially during colonial time. So after their terms, which was commonly 7 years, then they became free. Now, one thing also is with their freedom, reading began even during colonial time. This is one of the things that's also shocking, is that there were, and when we think about schools, it's not as when we think about big schools today in the public school system. But there were means for blacks to learn how to read even during colonial times, and particularly 1705 in Goose Creek, South Carolina.
Wow, so much history.
And this is she's looking back. This is a seamstress, which was a trade that a lot of black women were into, because you got to think, before the Industrial Revolution, where did all these clothes come from? So slaves made clothes, and then there were free blacks who were in that market making clothes. So then she's looking back at her heritage as she stitches forward and the making of the clothes.
Wow. Nice. Nice. I love that. What a story. These are so many. I think this is so important too, because I think one of the things that we forget is that our ancestors wasn't just fighting for freedom. They were fighting to be recognized as human beings. Because the foundational justifications for our enslavement was that we were subhuman. And since we were subhuman, then the laws of humanity, the universal laws of humanity, didn't apply. And so works like yours help us rehumanize. Because even when we talk about, and I think the reason why a lot of us want to get away from talking about slavery and that sort of is the dehumanization process that goes on when you talk about, man, I ain't no slave. I ain't no slave. But what is that? Like what you just said earlier with the stigma about that. You know, in our school, we say enslaved Africans, just to remind people that these were human beings, not objects, not things. And I think that the work that you're doing, that you've done, especially by blending the art with the historical records. Yeah, because someone, my good friends in the chat saying, what are the sources? You get this book, you're only using historical records.
Only because I didn't want to get anything wrong, especially the time when I was writing the book, because I knew if I got one point wrong out of all the information that I had, that was going to be the focus.
Everything, right?
They would gravitate towards that.
Yes, you know.
So, Bob, real quick for you, as an educator, active educator who's been working in curriculum development, how do you address the nuances of identity with our young people, with their parents, with the community at large? Because you operate as an educator on a modicum of levels, you know, from the youngest to the eldest. So how do we approach the situation of identity politics, identity crisis from a practical academic standpoint?
Well, one of the things we've learned that we have to make sure that our people understand that we're not a monolith. We're not all the same thing, right? We don't all have the same exact story, and that's okay, right? One of the things we do to reinforce that every morning at the Uhuru Academy, we honor our ancestors, and we do projects where we encourage our children to look into their own lineage. Not just we teach an overall Black history, but you have a Black history that's unique to you. And so who is your big mama? Who is your great grandmama, great granddaddy, great great granddaddy? What are their journey, right? We are a unique group of African people here in the United States. And I say African because that's the common identifier that we use, right? People can get into semantics or whatever, but we're a unique group in that over hundreds of different ethnic groups from West Africa were blended together and brought over here. That's why when so many of us go get our DNA done, we got like 5 or 6 different answers that come back, 5 or 6 different labels that come back. But what did that do? That gave us a unique opportunity, though, to say, you know what? We're going to throw the tribalism in the trash, and we're gonna embrace ourselves as people of African descent. I think it's important to understand that you could be a Hebrew in that, you can still be a Rasta in that, you can still be a Muslim, you can still be a Christian in that, right? And I think that's very, very important, that you could have a spiritual system that speaks to you, family traditions that speak to you, right? But look at it all from a lens of the experience of your people. Whatever you choose to call your people, are you in the group? So if you don't want to say I'm African, well, what are you? Because we all have a common link in this group, whether we want to acknowledge that or not, right? And so let's look at and explore and celebrate those commonalities and celebrate the differences as well. We've never been a monolith, ever. And so that's how we embrace at the Uhuru Academy. We tell them, honor whatever spiritual system you have going on at home. As soon as you get to school, we're going to honor our ancestors together, and then we're going to honor you and give you a voice. And then let's talk about your future. Where are you going? And so, and with adults, I tell them all the time, knowledge, I don't want to debate identity with you. I want to see what your identity builds. So whatever identity you choose, I want to see your stadium under that name. I want to see your land, your farm, your community building process under that name. Instead of arguing over who we are, embrace what it is that you say you are. Go build around it. Every movement is a bridge for some and a home for others.
Right, exactly.
Your relationship, real quick, with Baba Utashi, that's another link in the chain. I wish he could have been here. Honest to him and his queen and the movement that they're building. I want to draw a parallel to a place because you have an institution where our brother Charles can come and link with some of the greatest new African minds on the planet, and then there's a cultural infrastructure that's built in the community. So I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the House of Hathor, Baba and his queen, and many of the strides and the moves of things that are actionable, things that are happening.
Right, definitely. Baba Mutaski, Mama Queen Mother Nefertari, and they have House of Hathor located at 6319 North Main Street here in Columbia, South Carolina. It's not only a bookstore, art or African art store, you get your instance there, but it's also an event space. And in that event space, we are committed to bringing and curating artists, authors, people who are pushing the culture forward. But we have poetry nights at the House of Hathor. During Juneteenth, we have events there all week. We have during Kwanzaa, we have events there all week. We actually do events throughout the year, and so it will be a perfect space to bring the not only the book but the exhibit itself. And I would love to make that connection, and we can see how we can bring this great education into the community. And we're linked, and I like to say from the guttermost to the uttermost. We're gonna get folks in there from the hood and from the boardroom, all in the same place, celebrating who we are.
Right. And I like that you mentioned with the exhibit, because I just got a text in. I have been working on it, and I wasn't sure about if it was going to happen or not. But I got a text today, and it pretty much confirmed that in January of 2026, that I will be having a full exhibit at the 701 Contemporary Art Center in Columbia, South Carolina. Yes.
Right, that's what's up, man. That's what's up. Congratulations to our community, because that makes us better. So make sure I get that information, man. We're going to make sure we're there. We would definitely love to organize a field trip with the Uhuru Academy to bring our scholars out to the exhibit as well. And I get to brag and say, yeah, I know him, like that.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking for that information, because I'm bringing the document. This, although I've done it different places, I feel like it's matured now, like how I wanted it to be presented. Because a lot of times I'll have a painting, I'm not quite finished, but then I'll go with the exhibit because, hey, I need it. But now these pieces will be finished. I'll have the documents. Someone was asking about the sources, and I like sources. I love sources. Yes. Right next to the paintings.
Yes. So I want both of y'all to speak about the curriculum piece. Charles, if you could share your vision with Baba. Baba is a master curriculum writer, a school trainer, all kinds of things. A jack of all forests. You understand? Shout out to Jack Forrest, our ancestor. You understand what I'm saying? So if you want somebody to be able to chop through that heavy lifting and link you in with a dynamic homeschool and after school, before school network, you are looking at the man that can actually make that happen. So what do you envision from your studies and your research to be in a part of the curriculum? And Baba, if you could share a couple of tips on how you can make that happen. Or how you making it happen anyway.
Yeah, and as you said, we're just meeting, but I just know. Sometimes you meet people, when you meet the right person, and I know he is the right person for this, because I do the paintings, I do the research, and I know where my lane is. I know what I do, and the curriculum, I know. And then hearing you talk about the topics that you've talked about are the ideal person for this.
I say, well, I love that you're a mixed media artist, because I use mixed media in curriculum. People learn differently, right? Some are stimulated, some are visual, some like it written, right? What you've built is something that we can curate and turn into an interactive curriculum that not only will entail art, but video, creative writing, reading comprehension, right? There's even some mathematical elements that I see that we can build into it. You're talking vocabulary, the whole 9 yards. So what you got, that's more than enough to take and put into frameworks that young people identify with, older people identify with, and most importantly, where we can measure the learning. We want to know what they know coming in and what they know coming out. And that's how we measure the learning, right? And so yes, brother, this would be an honor to work with you to develop curriculum around it. I believe we already have the framework. I'm already thinking of some things right now that we're currently using in the Uhuru Academy that we could do there. I'm even thinking on a virtual reality aspect of Hidden Freedom as well, a VR experience where I can see the documents and see your artwork in that same space, right? And so there are so many avenues we could take in delivering this information to the community.
And that's what I like about what I create and what I do, is it being taken to the next level. And in hearing you say what you said, that's the next level. Concepts I just wouldn't think of, but when I hear them, I know this is a great idea.
Yes. So because we want to make sure that they get the best of the art and the information, and I want to keep them married. As we put curriculum together, let's make sure that marriage between the information and the art is solid. And there are so many ways that we can do that. Ebooks, so interactive ebooks, so many ways.
This is great. I've been thinking about it for a while, wanting it to happen, trying to meet the right person who can, and it has to be the right person. Meeting the right person, and you're the right person. Because there's some other people that were, kind of mentioning some things to me, but I think but now with you behind this, and this is just happening. I mean, we're just beginning to talk about this. This is incredible.
Yes, sir. So we'll definitely talk further. I have a passion for it. My team has a passion for it. And shout out to my beautiful wife and Koyo, without whom I would not be on this interview right now. And so it's not work for me. I've been blessed to get up and do something that I would do for free. I just do it so good that people pay me for it. So I'm straight, no, it would be an honor to work with you for the Uhuru Academy, to work with you and bringing this your work to life in the curriculum space, in the classroom space, homeschooling space. And we are linked to Black homeschoolers throughout the world, not just the country. And there is a huge network out there, a huge industry out there as well. If you want to talk on a business side of things, it's just a matter of tapping into it.
And a greater need.
Yes.
A greater need with a nuanced space that provides an additional layer in regards to shifting the narrative. So now, literally, we've been operating based off what we were given. Now look at what we've been given and look what we were able to do with it. So now introducing into the thought stream for years, things you heard whispering in the wind in a way that's tangible, taking it from the intangible to the tangible. Now what do you do with this? We need a whole global army of propagandists. So young people don't have to seek outside validation or, if they're creative artists and things like that. We went from, going to county jail and the city jail for markers, for spray cans and all of these things because we were devoid of creative spaces and creative outlets, to now in this interactive space to be able to have different representations of self, different representations of family, different representations of what it means, because the arts and the sciences are married together in regards to the determination of what a future looks like. If you look at yesterday, you found something. So if you could be looking at the Mona Lisa or the Mona Qualisha. You understand what I'm saying? So it does something to your psyche. You understand what I'm saying? So we have a beautiful opportunity, and the need is great because that's not going away. So we can put all of that all together in a way and present that to our people. you can do what you do and do what you love for yourself. You
Mhm.
understand what I'm saying? And it could be something that's a return on investment. You know what I mean?
I say,
So as younger purpose. So when I saw this all came from me meeting this young lady. I got to shout her out. She's an Africana Studies major. She left the financial world. She was an accountant dealing with the numbers and all of that for a passion for her people. So about 5, 6 years ago, and she's down here at the University of Central Florida. Her name is Jasmine Harris, and she is the manager of that exhibit space out there in Hannibal Heritage Square. I went over there and I saw her, and we did like a 2, 3 hour walkthrough of this space. The amount of stories that are there that are associated with this black town. You see what I'm saying? This black town and black people. So again, we don't have to go outside to look for morality, decency. We don't have to look for any of those things in regards to history makers and those who made strides in regards to building. So I just wanted to give her a quick shout out. And if y'all in the Orlando, Winter Park area or any place like that, Ocala, any of these places, you come down there to Hannibal Square and you see these historical spaces that are still up. They're still up and they're
mm,
still active. You know
I
what I
say,
mean? So it's a beautiful spot right here. So I know
absolutely.
everybody got to go. I got to go. We all got to go. So I give you a chance for final thoughts and where people can find you. And we connect up after we finish. So, Brother Charles, I give you your final thoughts, final remarks. If there's anybody you love, you want to give a shout out to, or anything like that, and where people can find you via social media, and we'll end up with you, Bobby.
Yes, and then I want to give a mention over at Hannibal Center with the interns that Jasmine has there doing great things. Freshmen in high school, interning, and just real knowledgeable students there. And I would like to say that the information, the knowledge that we get is important to becoming who we become. And so, with this being said, then a lot of that information, there are attempts for us not to get that information, but then in finding different avenues and connecting, like this is great. And I think the key part of a lot of it is having that desire to create a change and to shift the narrative. It's time for that narrative to shift.
I say,
Yes.
I say, I say.
And social media, where can they find you online? Social media.
Yes, and on Instagram, I'm at Charles Eady, and I have a website, deepersouth.org. And then you can pull out some information about the documents. You can see some of the sources and see some of my artwork. Deepersouth.org, and information about ordering the book, Hidden Freedom.
I say. All right. Knowledge, I want to acknowledge you. Another great program, great link up. I appreciate you reaching out. I appreciate all the work that you do with Do the Knowledge Radio. You can learn more about the Uhuru Academy at uhuruacademy.com. UHURU academy.com. You can I'm on Instagram at @thereal_Baba Amin. You can find me on Facebook at Baba Amin, on X at the Uhuru Academy. You put in the Uhuru Academy. I heard you people say Google me, you'll find me, right? And so definitely that. I do want to encourage everyone to continue to study, to continue to learn. We are now enrolling for our K-12 online program. All right, the best virtual education experience for Black children in the world. When you go to uhuruacademy.com, of course, just like any school, your richest private school, when you go up there to la prep, they're gonna say support the mission, right? But we ain't different. You go visit Uhuru Academy. First thing we want you to do is consider supporting the mission to empower the generation. That allows us to expand our curriculum, hire more teachers, and offer scholarships to the young people that need it the most. So I want to encourage everybody to go and say, you know what? What's a habit that I spend too much money on that I want to give up? Take that piece of money and donate it to African-centered education. All right. So your Black and Mild money, get that to us. Your 40-ounce money, get that to us. All right, one left bottle of liquor. Get that to us to support African-centered education. All right. And again, we also have our adult program, Operation Reconnect. If you know anybody who stopped out of school between the age of 16 and up, they need to get with us. We have a fast track to a high school diploma, but most importantly, we work on a life plan. Again, tonight, we're going to have a very engaging, check us out on Facebook and Uhuru Academy YouTube, very engaging conversation with Uhuru Academy instructor Sean Gales, going to show you how he obliterated the achievement gap in science using the Uhuru Academy model. Shout out to UASC International. That's our campus, our partner program, the campus here in Hopkins, South Carolina. Go to uascinternational.org. Also enrolling right now, toddler through 8th grade, right? So y'all, movements move and we out here moving. Come be a part of it. Ashe. I like that.
If I told you that in my mind, this is exactly what I envisioned, and what they say, write the vision and make it plain.
Come on,
exactly what I wanted to have happen today. Honest to both of you, dynamic change agents out here, being disruptors in regards to stagnation and complacency and mediocrity. So what you do with your art, what you do with your mind, utilizing these creative spaces for our future. So honest to you both. Charles, I'm gonna call you. Bob, I'm gonna call you.
Yes.
And link y'all together. We're gonna make this happen. So for right now, we up out of here. Peace and blessings, y'all.
Peace.
But as long as you're running around here wearing the white man's name, bragging about you one of the Jones, or one of the Browns, or one of the Smiths, or as long as you're running around here bragging about your part in this so-called American democracy, then you will always be looked down upon as a chump by the white man. You never will be given recognition nor respect.
You think that you a citizen? Citizens don't get harassed and worry about the police killing them. You represent the USA? Well, they try to find ways to kill your black ass every day, huh? You love the red, white, and blue. Well, I wonder how this government feel about you. You call yourself a patriot, I call it all an act. How can you love a country that never loved you back, huh?
When did Uncle Sam start loving black folks? When he took away our land, our names, and all hoes. Maybe when it worked us, till our back broke. Let's jump off this slave ship and do the backstroke. But you don't wanna leave your slavery and Jim Crow. You think you know it all, but it's all that you know. Your perm and your job, fast food to go. Big screen TVs and reality shows. They either killing you fast or killing you slow. Decreasing the odds of our children to grow. Got them popping the bars and snorting the snow. Having dreams of selling crack rap or making the pros. The school is full of crap teachers making them doze. They wake up in the cell guard taking their clothes. We don't say shit until the casket enrolls. Uncle Sam big pimpin', we get treated like hoes.
Uncle Sam big pimpin', we get treated like hoes. The Asians and the Arabs in the hood getting chose. Where we run through the highs and crawl through the lows. Korea in my hair, Vietnam on my toes. Arab disrespect me when I walk in their stores, but I got nowhere else to go as my indignity grows. My mind goes numb, my sensitivity slows. My heart grows cold until it's finally froze. This is a place that don't respect us. I don't think that it's fair. I gotta talk like I'm a pepperwood and straighten my hair. Just to get a shitty job with a desk and a chair. My man ain't had no luck, but what I get we can share. Only thing is they gon' kick me out my house if he there. I don't fuck with child support if he ain't doing his share. I won't give him to the enemy. What good is he there? Crack a garnish in his wages, got y'all thinking he care.
You think that you a citizen? Citizens don't get harassed and worry about the police killing them. You represent the USA? Well, they try to find ways to kill your black ass every day. You love the red, white, and blue. Well, I wonder how this government feel about you. You call yourself a patriot, I call it all an act. How can you love a country that never loved you back, huh?
Yeah. Now we gonna tell them. That in front. We tell them like this, yo. I'm an African. I'm a African. I'm a African. I'm a African. Yeah, y'all like that? So no more. This man's mind is open. I'm a African. I'm a African. I'm a African. I'm a. Let's get
And
back
that
to
motive
the
is best developed by recognizing the common enemy.